Paula Span, it's a great honor to have you on.
Good morning, Ahmed. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. I'm doing extremely well, given that I'm talking to you. I have been looking forward to this conversation. I've been reading your work. You're an amazing person. What you do is extremely meaningful. So I'm going to ask you, off the bat, I'm going to ask you, how does it feel to have accomplished so much?
Well, in the general scheme of things, I am content and satisfied and take pride in what I've done. But it's, journalists are not usually earth shakers and earth movers, and we have to content ourselves with saying it is an honorable thing to do to present information to the world, to help readers understand their world. And that's what I've tried to do. But have I accomplished so much? I think I've done well. When I'm 76, and it's an age when you begin looking back at, you reflect on what you've done, and I feel good about it, but I don't want to stop.
Oh, no,
I
no, no.
want,
Absolutely
I
not.
want, I want to keep doing it, and I'm one of those increasing numbers of older people who continue to work because, first of all, we're not mining coal or standing on assembly lines, so we can physically keep doing this. And because I find it satisfying and rewarding, and as a freelance most of my life, I don't have any pensions, so I need my income. So I'm not stopping.
Well, that's good news. That's great news, actually, that you're not stopping. And I think as I'm growing older, I think that age is a superpower, to be honest with you, in the sense that you know so much, and you gain wisdom, knowledge, connections, and so forth. That people, if we can work as we get older, well, exactly what you said, like this is fun and it's meaningful. And what are you gonna do, right? You wake up in the morning, you have meaningful things to do. What is better than that? Um,
I
you know?
And it's not just that having a purpose makes us feel good, but I've just been writing about this lately, so it's of interest to me. There's all kinds of research on purpose and how it has measurable, important impact on our lives. It improves our health. It keeps us from cognitive impairment, at least longer. It even helps us sleep better. It helps us have interpersonal connections. It's up there with exercise as something that we need and we should strive to incorporate into our later lives. So to have purpose not only makes us feel like we have a reason to get up in the morning, but it also enriches our lives, extends our lives, improves our health, all kinds of good things.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's why I'm not surprised when I hear that extremely wealthy people are miserable because they have lost, I think, they have lost a sense of purpose. There's nothing crucial that they have to do. It's just money and whatever. And so I'm not surprised when I hear that. And then when I hear that folks who are poorer, and who have responsibilities, all right, are they just go for it and they wake up in the morning and they have a purpose and they're not as miserable as say a billionaire who just wakes up and is wondering why what else are they gonna do. Anyway, that's my take on it. Um so um well you wrote, talk about purpose and journalists making an impact. You wrote something in May, an article called Honey Sweetie Dearie, The Perils of Elderspeak, that was astonishingly that has an astonishing had an astonishing resonance, it seemed to me. I mean, I post articles and my team posts articles every day as part of what we do, and most of them they get maybe a couple of hundred of views and maybe a few comments, but yours got hundreds of thousands of views, right, and hundreds of comments. And we sort of published the article, right, and we shared it twice, and both times. So one in May when it came out, I believe, and later on, and both times it just had so much resonance. Um, why do you think it had such a reaction? What are your thoughts
Um,
on that?
you know, I saw this reaction too. So my column is called The New Old Age, and I've been writing it for the New York Times since 2009. I didn't start it, but I been writing it since 2009. And we enable comments on this column.
Mm,
So
mm,
this column, which is now a co-production with KFF Health News, which is a nonprofit newsroom that reports on health-related matters. So on the New York Times, in our comment section, we got 1,000 comments on this, and that's a lot. So I think the reason is you almost don't have to explain to people what elder speak is. They know it intuitively. It's that way that people have of being condescending, talking to you as if you're a toddler, calling you honey or dearie. Sometimes, in healthcare settings or in long-term care, using words that 3-year-olds use. Do you need to go to the potty? Are you
mm,
ready on your jammies? Or using we and are we ready to eat breakfast? And people recoil from it. They find it insulting. They find it infantilizing. And this is one of those subjects that people have researched, scientists have researched, and a lot of this work comes from the University of Iowa School of Nursing, is that this has measurable impact, even in people with dementia in long-term care settings. When they are spoken to this way, they become resistant to care.
mm.
Like these are people that might not be able to explain to their caregivers that they don't like this, but they become more resistant. They might like resist eating, clamp their mouths shut, push people away, even get, violent, not intentionally, but they're trying to stop this behavior. But it turns out that you can train caregivers to not do this, to talk to people with dignity. And when you do, this resistance to care declines measurably. And also, so interesting, in these long-term care settings in the Midwest, where this research was conducted, after these training sessions with the care staff, the use of psychoactive drugs among those patients went down. And
Mm,
this is something that every facility is trying to do.
mm,
And here's one way to do it. So I think, so the people who were commenting on the New York Times site, or when you publish this, were not patients with dementia. These are everyday people who go to a doctor's office, check in, and the receptionist says, "Have a seat, sweetie. We'll be with you soon." And they just hate it. And it's well intended. I should point out, these
well, yeah,
folks are not
exactly. Why do you think we do that? Why? What's the
uh,
what do you?
they're not trying to diminish us.
Mm,
They're trying to be friendly, and and in long-term care settings, they're trying to induce people to do things that they might not want to do, like get up and take a shower, things like that. So it's not poorly intended. Um, I just think the people that use it are do not recognize the way it makes people feel as if you're being treated like a kid,
do you think
when
that?
in fact,
Yeah,
you've lived 60 or 70 or 80 years. You're not a kid. Don't talk to me that way.
yeah, yeah. Do you think the reason why we behave that way, meaning why caregivers would use such language, is because instinctively you see somebody vulnerable, and so you want to be gentle. I don't want to do psychiatry and psychology right now, but I just want to understand. It's an impulse that sort of just comes out. Um, do you think that has anything to do with it?
I,
Perhaps.
I think it's meant to be kind of affectionate, maybe.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, uh, but you can't assume that we're so vulnerable.
Right. Right.
We talk to our pets this way too.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
not a 3-year-old. I'm not a toddler. I'm an adult. I want to be treated with dignity, and I want to be treated that way, even if I have real
Yeah.
health and cognitive problems. That does not make me less worthy of dignity. So, if you wouldn't talk to a professor this way, like if your doctors, for example, like you must have had this happen. I have. Like they call you by your first name, and if I called them by their first name, they would bridle, their doctor, whoever. So, when people wrote in about this, they said, my doctor said, Sharon, how have you been? And I said, I've been great, Dick. How about you? And like that is such a breach of norms that people immediately realize, oh. So this is a fairly simple solution, right? People should ask you, how would you like me to call you? Would you like me to call you by your first name? Would you like me to call you Mrs. Whoever or Mr. Whoever? Or do you not care? And that kind of clears that up.
Yeah, yeah. Do you think it's because that's a good strategy. If the doctor starts to familiarize himself with me, I'll do the same. Maybe that will snap them out of there, perhaps.
It's legit,
Legit, right?
if you're on a first name basis, you're on a first name basis in both directions. If you're not, you're not.
Yeah, yeah. And I think, like you said, people are not doing this maliciously or with bad intent at all. And so I think getting them to realize, maybe subtly or explicitly, as you were saying, is a good strategy. So you also teach in Columbia University. Are you still teaching?
At the journalism school. Yeah.
So,
And
so
that's
how,
it's kind of a trip to be doing that at this age. We have these huge age divisions in this country. We're very age segregated.
yeah.
So, I think I like having regular intergenerational contact. I have a granddaughter, but and I have a daughter and a son-in-law, but I like being around 23-year-olds. I learn from them. And I think it's valuable for them to see a professor who's 76. Most young people don't know any old people outside their own family. I
Mm,
might be the only person that they interact with on a regular basis besides their own grandparents. And for them to see me as knowledgeable and competent and authoritative, I think is valuable too. Plus, I like the legacy aspect of training the next generation of journalists because, I mean, all teachers know this, right? Um, you want to pass along your knowledge and experience. And if you believe in the mission, like I still believe in journalism, despite our many, many shortcomings that we know better than anyone else. I believe in this mission and I want to help the next generation to continue to be a strong and independent voice.
yeah, yeah. Well, how do you, since you are right there teaching the next generation and having yourself done it as opposed to just talking about it, right? Um, how do you see journalism? It's a little bit off topic, but how do you see journalism changing, or has it changed quite a bit? Probably the core mission is the same, but how do you see it evolving, and in what way do you think it is better or worse now than what you think it should be?
Well, of course, it's changed dramatically
Yeah.
because I came of age and started working as a journalist literally 50 years ago, and I know how to change a typewriter ribbon because that's how we did it. And we had no cell phones, and we had no internet, and so it was print or it was broadcast. Um, and you could join a newspaper staff and expect to spend your career there. And now, of course, it's entirely different. I understand more than some because I've been a freelance. So I've
Mm,
had to be
mm,
adept at finding new places to publish, finding new subjects to publish about. And so in that way, I think I'm able to
mhm.
perhaps empathize with their career concerns because one of the things that's changed is local journalism is drying up.
Yeah.
1,000 newspapers have closed in the past decade or two, um, and every publication that still exists is either entirely online or has an extremely robust online presence. So the New York Times, for example, has maybe 500,000 print subscribers and 10 million plus digital subscribers. It's just a different world. And KFF Health News is entirely a digital publication. There is no print version. So we have to adapt to all of that. But the core mission, I think, is the same. I mean, we, changed a lot in the way we report, in the way we write, the way we see the way we engage in audiences, for better and for worse. I like that my readers can email me and comment on my articles. When I began, if someone wanted to contact me, they had to write me a letter and
Yeah.
put it in the mail or
Yeah.
call me on the phone if they
Yeah.
could figure out how to do that. And they very seldom did. So you didn't always know what your readers were thinking. And now you do. And sometimes it's not always a pleasant prospect. But the comments, I will say, on the New York Times are moderated. So it's not a free fire zone. And it's useful for me to read, what several hundred people think about topic A or B, and I get ideas from them too.
Yeah.
But this idea of technology kind of segues nicely into what technology has done for our older brains. So
Yeah.
um, I think that was one of the things you wanted to talk
Yeah,
about.
absolutely. You wrote a piece, was a couple of weeks ago, or no, a month ago, came out in early August, right?
Mhm.
And what I liked about it is it was not this sort of very simplistic, hey, technology is reduces our thinking, we become, lazier and so forth, which I don't believe at all. It all depends on how you engage with it and so forth. So tell us about your findings in that piece, and sort of what's the bottom line that you can point to.
Well, it actually kind of came across my inbox, this study, a meta-analysis of 57 studies done around the world
Hmm.
by a couple of neuropsychologists at the University of Texas, Austin. Because yes, we're all hearing this message all the time. Technology rots your brain. Technology, makes you polarized, and essentially it makes you stupid. And especially for kids and adolescents, limit their screen time, not too much screen time, maybe no screen time. So this meta-analysis was actually interesting because it found that for older people, actually, if you engage with technology, a computer, a phone, the internet, your risk of cognitive impairment and dementia was actually lower
Hmm.
than people the same age with the same health status who did not use technology for older people. So we're a natural experiment, right? We are the first generation that had to contend with the digital revolution. Our kids and our grandkids, it's always been there. They
True.
haven't had to go through this change, but we did, and we didn't always like it. Let's be clear.
Yeah.
Technology is not easy always, and it's not always fun, and there's all those updates and there's all those problems. But what these researchers believe is that over decades of this, I mean, we all have been dealing with technology. If you're my age, you've been dealing with technology for like 40 years, or 50. No, I think 40. But
70 started in the
that,
70s, right? That's when we started seeing
well,
maybe.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I'm trying to think, it's hard for us to remember what it was like before. But I think when I first started, I was reporting, and we had one radio phone that we passed around among the reporters at the Washington Post and the New York Bureau. We only had one, so you could call in a story without having to find a phone booth. So it's like this complete revolution. But the process of all of us having to engage with that
Hmm.
um, has been the kind of cognitive challenge that is good for our brains. So this study came out, and I said it was like, it's almost like a nutritionist telling you, oh, wait, actually, bacon is good for you. Because we've heard so many, and
Exactly.
the warnings actually make sense, Ahmed, for children and maybe for adolescents. You
Hmm.
don't want it sitting on screens all day. But we already knew how to read and write and think and interact when this technology came along. And then we had to learn it and keep learning it and relearning it and learning new versions of it. And so now um, it probably has done us some good. Although, to be fair, we know that dementia rates around the world the developed world are going down. And there are lots of possible explanations. So people say it's because we are have more education, which is correlated with dementia, right? It's because we stopped smoking. It's because, in some cases, people say it's because of unleaded gasoline. It's because we can control high blood pressure and and diabetes and
Yeah,
other things.
yeah.
But technology could have played a role, and I just thought it was an interesting
Yeah,
take.
yeah. No, what those studies are, were scientific, so I'm sure they did a lot of control in terms of the variables and so forth. So I think there is definitely, and I read the article and I came out convinced that there is something here. It's not simply, perhaps it's due to something else, and it's a coincidence. It feels to me that there's, and I feel it myself in terms of, I have to solve problems all the time, right, with technology, even though it enables me, because it enables me to do X, Y, and Z. Like when ChatGPT came out, I spent time trying to figure out how to use it and so forth, and that was challenging in itself. It was an effort. It was a cognitive effort to figure out all those things, and so my brain was being used as such, in terms of figuring out. And the fact of I think change itself, I think perhaps maybe this is what's going on here, is the fact that you have to deal with change and you have to sort of figure out constantly. Like there's always a puzzle going on, right? With technology, perhaps that's what making the exercise going on there in terms of the muscles that are being used to figure out how do I use these tools, perhaps.
Yeah, and I don't like it when technology changes. I groan. I say, "Oh man,
Yes,
I
you
know
have to
how to do this.
lift.
Now you're telling me I have to do all this other stuff, and I don't want to do it, but it is probably good for me." Now, it is true that this is these are observational studies,
Yeah,
and some of my commenters who I have very literate commenters say, "Well, this is correlation, not causality. It's not a randomized clinical trial with control groups." Well, I mean, there is a control group. It's the ones who didn't use
yeah,
technology.
right.
But how could you can't do randomized clinical trials for everything. Could you really take, a group of 4 or 5 thousand people and tell one of them to use the internet and the other one to tell them, look, for the next 30 years, you can't use the internet. Like you can't do that. It
Right,
won't work. It's not ethical. So
right.
this is the best we've got. But I think we'll find out with, with respect to cognitive decline and dementia, which is one of the biggest healthcare issues in the
Yeah,
world. I think we'll find out, we're already finding out that there are multiple factors. So, yes, it does help that
yeah,
today's older generation is better educated. And it does help that we don't smoke as much. And it does help that we have drugs that can control certain problems. Um, but this might be a factor too.
yeah, yeah. I agree. And I've always been bothered by the reaction. This is not, or correlation is not causation, as if we knew what causation meant philosophically, right? What is a cause? I mean, I don't want to get into the David Hume and all that, but in any case, um, it's not as obvious as that. Like you said, you can arrive at conclusions without it having been like completely, as it were, scientifically, right? You still can get meaning out of studies, and I think this is one of those. Now, in terms of as you well know, all there are tools that are so sharp that they are sharp on both ends in the sense that technology also, it feels to me, can lead folks to isolate a little bit more than they should, right? They can do things on their own, right? And I think we know that social isolation is one of those, um, you know, those ills that are infecting our society a lot more than before, perhaps. I don't know. I don't know if that's true or not, but what we know is that social isolation is lethal almost. If you are getting older and you're socially isolated, it can reduce your span, So that sort of tension between technology enabling us to, to do things and to exercise, and then technology perhaps to the extent that it does, pushing us to be more isolated, less connected in a real way, so to speak. Can you speak to that tension if you see it?
Yeah, I think we feel this in our own lives. I mean, I have friends that I have never met or met only once or twice because they live far away, but we are in touch um,
Hmm.
through different kinds of technology communities, technology enabled communities. And the way people define disability which is a concern for older people. Like disability is when you can't do certain activities. So one of these are called activities of daily living. You know, can you take a shower? Can you get dressed? Can you use the bathroom? But the other one is called instrumental activities of daily living. Can you do your banking? Can you do your shopping? You know, can you handle your finances? And so in some ways, you could say that because we don't have to physically go to the bank very much,
Right.
because we don't physically have to go out and mail letters, because we can have our groceries, delivered by Instacart and our takeout meals. Because of that, we actually are less disabled if we have mobility issues than we were before.
Mm,
But of course, it is possible to just hole up and never actually have face-to-face interactions with anybody. And that is so alarming that the Surgeon General put out a report about Americans' loneliness and isolation, and which the pandemic showed us very directly how dangerous that could be,
yeah.
when people who lived in nursing homes suddenly could not see their families, could not engage in activities, could not even have meals with other people. They were essentially in solitary confinement for months and months, and it was terrible. And I had as I was talking about this with a very prominent geriatrician, he said, Paula, it's not just the virus that's killing these people.
Mm.
So, we need to balance our use of technology, to use it when it's useful, but not to rely on it for everything so that we become these hermits. But isn't that true for like lots of things, leaving aside the internet? Weren't there always people who never did anything but watch TV, and that was
Or
not
read,
good?
or read books.
Well, I mean, I am a reader and I like reading books, but the ancients were right about these things, like all things in moderation. So,
Exactly. Yeah.
um,
Yeah, exactly.
humans are social animals, and we need some kind of connections with other humans. And the degree to which we do that, and the way and the reason, can vary wildly from one person to another. But I recently moved from New Jersey to Brooklyn to be closer to my daughter and son-in-law and my granddaughter. And one of the first things I did when I got here was to start a Scrabble group. And we meet in one of, I recruited three other people, and we meet in one of our apartments once a month and play Scrabble. And it's not just, who wins the Scrabble game. It's a built-in way to make sure that we see other people at least once a month. I actually see other people a lot, because I can be out and about, and I have a day when I pick up my grandkid from school, and that's Bubby Day. Bubby is Yiddish for grandma. And I have friends in the neighborhood, and I have my students, and I'm not isolated. But moving to a new place
Yeah.
can be a little daunting at an advanced age. And so I've been very proactive about, making connections in my new neighborhood, making sure my friends know I'm here, meeting people for theater or dinner or whatever. Because I know it's very easy, because one thing the internet does, it makes it easy to stay home, be in front of a screen hours a day. And I don't think that's really a healthy way to live either.
Yeah.